an expert in his field, a business consultant, keynote speaker, certified DISC trainer, the author of hundreds of articles and 9 books, including 2 on employee retention. Greg?
Hey, thanks, Sarah, and I'd like to welcome everybody to today's webinar. This is Greg Smith, captain of the ship and president of ChartYourCourse International. We have a lot to cover this afternoon, and I appreciate that you joined us. And when I said, well, this ought to be pretty easy, I can do this in about 30 minutes. And when I started putting this program together and said, oh my gosh, there's a lot of information here. So if there's going to be a complaint is you're going to say too much information, too short. So I apologize in advance. Now, I also, when you're looking at this screen, and hope if you have any questions or any issues, just type them there on the little box to the right of your computer screen, and Sarah will be watching for those and take care of anything that might pop up. But not all of these 7 mistakes or 7 issues are going to be true for your company. And what you need to also keep in mind when you're talking about employee turnover, employee retention, it's going to be different for every company. And now, if you have an online retail company or if you have a IT company, the issues and the problems are going to be different. So some of these things may be relevant, some of them may not, but at least I hope you'll get at least 1 or 2 ideas how and implement in your organization as we go forward. So let's look at the first mistake. And I'm going to open my screen, make it a little bit bigger here. Mistake number 1 is a program versus a culture mentality. And when I grew up, my fascination was with Walt Disney and Disney World. And I remember he was giving a presentation once, and someone asked Walt Disney, they said, how do I become a millionaire just like you? How do I become successful? And he said, no problem. It's very easy. All you got to do is take the yellow pages, the phone directory, close your eyes, open the directory, and run your finger down the directory and stop. And then he said, then open your eyes. And he said, whatever business it is, make it the absolute best business it can be. And then he added, I just never got past amusement parks. So what is the difference between Disney World and an amusement park? And it comes down to is understanding and creating a culture of how you want to drive the actions of your organizations. Now, I always remember I started off my career in the military, and we hated the program mentality. It was sort of what you call the flavor of the month, or like a new diet. Here comes a new program, big fanfare, roll it out, we're going to do this, we're going to change that. And a month later, everybody's still scratching their heads. So, well, what was that program? Because you find programs don't change behaviors. And many times programs create skepticism. And the more program mentality you try to manage, like starting an employee of the month program or something, and if it doesn't change the culture, which doesn't change the values and the behaviors of the organization, then you're in trouble. And you start breeding skepticism. So I always love what Matthew Schuler, he said here, the Chief Human Resources Officer for Hilton Hotels, and he said, you want to provide meaningful work in a culture where people are passionate about what they do. How many times do you go to the office and it's not passion, it's depression? And in this culture that we are living in today, and we're coming out of the recession and the bad economy, a lot of people are starting to think about leaving your company to go somewhere else. And how do we stem that off? Now, we've always heard about this great company, Zappos. Tony Hsieh is the CEO. And I met Tony in Las Vegas. I was speaking at a conference, and I said, well, this was like years ago, and I said, I want to see this place for myself because I'm sort of a skeptic, and I want to go there and actually see if all the good things I've been reading about and hear about Zappos are really true. And you walk into Zappos, and if you're talking about culture, it's like going to kindergarten. I mean, people are excited to come to work. They're excited to see you. And what they did at Zappos to make this a permanent part of their culture, or I should say this excitement and enthusiasm about working, is they created 10 values that they live, breathe, and die over. And, their interviewing questions are based on these 10 values. When you go to the restroom and they have like graffitied all these values on the walls everywhere you go. You buy a box of shoes from Zappos, they have one of their values on the shoe box. And they just live and breathe this culture, and it just creates this wonderful environment to go to. You see their vision statement, which is down here in the bottom of this slide, is delivering happiness to customers, employees, and vendors. It doesn't say we sell shoes, or we just try to make a profit, or we just want to gouge our customers. No, it's about delivering happiness, and they train their people. They hire the people so that they're really happy at work. And believe me, this is not bogus. This is reality. So, that is thing. And here's some of the other things they did to sort of inculcate this culture in Zappos. And we'll just talk briefly about one or two of these, and then we're going to move on to the next mistake. Is, again, as I said, focus on the culture. And one way that they create happiness in their company is they have a 4-week employee orientation program. And 2 weeks of that 4 weeks, everybody has to be on the phone and take sales calls. And it doesn't matter if you're the CEO or COO, you're going to spend time on the telephone actually talking to customers. And then at the end of the orientation program, the 3rd week, they offer you around $4,000 to quit and go somewhere else. I mean, that's really strange, isn't it? But the thing is, what they realize, it's cheaper to pay people to leave who don't fit the culture and may bring down, the attitudes and behaviors of other people because, they're not a Zappoid kind of person. So it's better for them to go to only attract and retain the right people for the right jobs in this particular company. So that's what they do at Zappos, and it's awesome. I even applied for a job when I visited there, but they said I wouldn't. Right now, HR says it's easier to get accepted at Harvard Business School than get a job at Zappos right now. The second mistake is not managing by fact. Many of us become reactionary. Now, just imagine you wake up this morning and all your hair has fallen out of your head. Boy, wouldn't that be a scary thought? And when we have this, maybe this program mentality, what we want to do is try to find a knee-jerk decision on that particular issue. But if your hair fell out, what should you do? Well, you go to a physician and you diagnose the root causes. Root causes, bad word for this description, no pun intended. But you want to find out what is causing people to stay in your company, what is causing people to leave your company, and then find out why were they attracted to your company. So when you manage by fact, you have to sort of do like a surgical analysis. And interesting, I was working with one company, and I was talking to the HR director because they were having a problem with turnover, and I asked him, said, do you do exit surveys? And he said, oh, yes, we do. My department handles all the exit surveys. And I said, well, what happens to the results? He said, well, they're all right here in my drawer. And I said, we need to look at these exit surveys, and we found that there was one department in their company that had more turnover than any other department. And I said, well, what did you do about this? Well, nothing. I just didn't want to rock the boat. So what you have to do is find out, why do people want to work at your company? Find out, why do they leave? Now, and what you find many times when you do an exit survey, they don't tell you the truth. So you need to have someone who's a little bit maybe neutral from your company and follow up with these people a couple, 3 weeks after they go, because nobody wants to burn their bridges and get a bad referral. And and also find out when you interview people, um, why did they say no to your company? Did they have a better offer somewhere else, and what did that better offer mean to them? So there's one hospital we looked at as a Malcolm Baldrige winner, and what they did to make this more of a scientific process is they broke their employees into various quadrants, and they do an interview with the new employees the first 90 days on the job, and I need to go back to that slide. And then they do a stay interview, with employees between 5 and 15 years. And the interesting thing you find after someone has been with the company is what motivates them or engage them is different than, say, with maybe someone in a younger generation or a new employee. And what they found the most important thing was that kept them at this hospital was the quality of the managers, is the relationships they had with their own supervisors. So you just have to understand, you can't just, we used to talk about the importance of reward and recognition. You just can't go back and say, well, everybody needs more reward recognition, because some people, particularly when you start looking at the generations when you manage by fact, there's a huge difference and gap between the younger generation and, say, my generation, the baby boomer generation. What motivates us and what our expectations are going to be totally different than if you just hired a 22-year-old right out of college. So look at your workforce. And the other important, there's a lot of great articles, and maybe you saw it in the Navigator newsletter, about the difference between and the needs of men and women, working mothers and men, is finding out that everybody needs something a little bit different, and you need to know those things for your particular company in order to attract and retain the best talent. So here's some of the things what human resources should need and needs to do. And I just want to highlight the first one, and also let you know, you're probably going to ask this question: how do I get a copy of these slides? Well, you will get an email probably tomorrow where you can download the PDF version of these slides, because I know there's a lot of information that we're covering fast. But I want to emphasize, one thing up here, and I'm probably going to shrink this down a little bit so I can use my highlighter here, is you need to hold people accountable. I mean, I would hold my department heads, my managers, accountable for the turnover in their own department. And I guarantee you your employee retention rates will improve if you do hold people accountable. Make sure you don't hold people accountable for something they have no control over, for example. And if you want to get the attention of your senior executives, start, figure out the cost of turnover. How much does it cost to lose someone? And particularly, how much does it cost you when you lose a high performer? And you put dollars and cents to that, then you're really going to get the attention of the people that you need to get attention from to improve your turnover. You just don't want to say, well, this month, we lost 5 people. You might want to say, and you figure out that it's 2 times their salary, and you say, well, it just cost us $300,000 to lose those 2 or 3 people this month. Then people's eyes start opening up. So, so those are some of the things you need to think about if you're in the human resources department. The other thing I want to cover is, if you want to find out what people are saying about your company, I learned this from my son. He's 25 years old. He's has a really good job working for a bank doing web designing, but he, like a lot of people with his generation, they start to get itchy after about 18 months, and because they're really afraid if they aren't seen as someone who moves 18 months or even, gosh forbid, 12 months, they're going to be perceived as non-competitive about their future employment. So there's this website called Glassdoor. You can just type in your company and you can see exactly what people are saying about your company. And here's the interesting, when it comes down to job interviews, I'm going to show you a slide in a minute that, most job interviews are poorly done and do not give you the information you need to know to hire the right person. They list the interview questions that these companies ask them so everybody can go there and check it out. I'm sure many of you are already familiar with this company, but it just tells you is that if you don't do something other than just interview questions, you may not be getting the right horsepower for your organization. And I just highlighted or cut out one thing. I cut out the name of the company. I didn't want anybody to see that. But this is what one person said about the company they interviewed with. And I just sort of want to highlight this quickly. Just to also brings up a point about the younger generation and the older generation. But if you want to attract some people, replace all the high-end engineers who are retiring in a decade or so, and says, don't forget, it takes 8 or 10 years to a good engineer to really learn this whole building a jet airplane thing works. So what we're seeing is sort of a conflict between the younger and the older generation, and just something to keep in the back of your mind about what people are saying about your company and maybe what you should start to focus on improving. So let's talk about the next thing, mistake number 3. And I see we're at 3:20 and I'm supposed to be over by 3:45, so I need to move on here. Poor hiring practices. Jim Collins wrote a great book, one of my favorite books, From Good to Great, and it's a thing about how do you know who is the right person for the right job. And when you look at typical job interviews, the saying is that 40% of turnover could be eliminated with effective hiring and interviewing techniques. We see, particularly with a lot of the younger generation, is that money is very important to them today, particularly in this economy. And if you don't put the right people in the right jobs, you're going to see a higher turnover rate. And what happens many times is people get interviewed, they're told here's what your job's going to be, and then they get hired and they're put in a totally different job, or they're put in with a manager or a supervisor who may not be so good, and then they're going to be highly disappointed and disengaged and will leave or eventually leave the organization. So as you all know, I really believe strongly in job benchmarking and behavior and leadership and communication assessments. I would never hire anybody without doing some sort of an online assessment, because since they already know what interview questions they're going to be asked when they go in, and legally you can only ask certain questions, you have to go to the next step. And you really have to understand, when you look at a person, you have to think, well, what is the engine? In the old days when we used to have GTOs and high-performance cars, I think of people like they are some sort, and this sounds kind of crazy, but they're like an automobile. If they're in the right job, that RPM is optimized. They will go faster. They will be more fulfilled. And that is where you find out is what type of RPM do they bring to the position, and are they aligned with the right job? And I know I'm not doing this justice, and I'm going pretty quick. And what I want to do here in a minute is going to ask Sarah, see if there's any questions. But I just want to finish up this point is when you do a job benchmark, you can look at the top 35 key competencies that is needed for the person to be successful in the job. And so what you want to do is ensure that person brings that to the position. And once you're in that position, you'll be able to use one of these reports to show how close they come to the requirements of the job, as well as each individual who may be applying for that position. So what I want to do, Sarah, is see if there's any questions, and if there is, we'll
Sure.
ask that, and
Yeah.
then we'll move on.
Very good, Greg. We had someone interested, when we look at employee retention and these 7 things, which should we start with first?
That's a good question, and what you need to understand is where's the biggest pain. And it could be if it's a financial issue, you may have to reevaluate your pay and your compensation and see if that might be the particular thing. But what we find out, and what we'll probably talk about in I think the 5th mistake, is also the quality of the managers and supervisors. So let's we'll hold off any other questions toward the end here, and let's look at mistake number 4. When we look at onboarding or orientation, we talked about Zappos. It has a 4-week orientation process, and then there is an exam at the end that they have to pass as well, and then they offer you the opportunity to take $2,000 or $3,000 and go somewhere else. But it's very important to build connections, and having a good orientation program is pretty important. I remember when my daughter graduated from college, she got a job in a law firm, and so she didn't know anybody. And she told me that the first week, and they had a company cafeteria at the law firm, and the first week she had lunch sitting in her car outside the office, because when she went to the cafeteria, they didn't assign her to like a mentor or a buddy or anybody, and everybody had this sort of their friends or a clique, and she just felt like an outsider. And that would be the terrible thing to do if that's part of your new employee orientation process, where you alienate them right up front. So having an effective onboarding process is pretty important. And one organization we worked with created something called the Lunch Bunch. I'm not going to cover all these for sake of time, but the Lunch Bunch is where they assigned a department to sort of mentor all the new employees their first week on the job, and they took them out to lunch every day of that first week, and it really made them feel collegial and part of the organization. And what we find is turnover usually is 50% higher with employees the first 90 days on the job. This other organization, you see the picture, and this was the old-fashioned days when they actually used paper. They would take a photograph of the new employee and created this new employee spotlight and put a little information about the person, where they came from, maybe about their pets or their family, and then they put this on a bulletin board, or you can put it on your intranet or your blog or your company Facebook page, and it made the person much more, felt good about the company, and everybody got to know them. Because a lot of times the natural reaction, if you're the new person, everybody sort of, ignores you until you've proven yourself. You should turn that around the other way. So here's a few questions, is that we call it, a motivational profile. And this is just like 4 questions from 15 that we provide to managers. Is find out from the person is when do you feel the most appreciated for what you do? Because every individual is motivated differently. Everybody values reward recognition differently. And when you can find out when in their life they felt the most appreciated for something they did, you want to sort of recreate that for them somewhere in their employment with your organization, with your department. And then the other question is, what strengths or skills that you have your team can use? Again, if you use some form of online behavior assessment or a DISC assessment, which we believe strongly in. That information is already provided to you on that online assessment, and all the manager has to do is read page 5 and says, hey, how do you like to be motivated? What's the best way to communicate to you? It sort of accelerates that whole get-to-know-you process, and is pretty important. And there's one question that can be used for any type of coaching or part of the employee satisfaction survey is, ask them, what does good communication look like? Because me as a consultant, the number one problem everybody always says is, well, communication's bad in this company. Well, everybody measures effective communication differently as well. So make sure you know what this person or the manager knows. What does good communication look like? Does that mean send me 10,000 more emails, or does it mean some sort of one-on-one communication, or you want to have a company get-together, a social get-togethers to find out how each person measures effective communication. Now, I always want to talk, my favorite is about if you don't train your managers. What we find time and time after again, this is just nothing new to anybody on this call, I'm sure, is 47% of the people who quit companies leave their manager, not the company. They just don't have the right relationship, or for some reason the manager is not properly trained. That is usually the number one big thing that makes people want to leave a company, is they leave their manager, not their company. So make sure if you put people in management positions, you give them some sort of training. Richard Finnegan and I speak at a lot of SHRM meetings, and I was listening to him, and he put up this point is only 34% of managers and supervisors know how to retain people. They're not given the right training, the right tools. You should have like a retention toolkit. You should have scenarios written out. So if employee so-and-so does this, what is the manager supposed to do? And the right answer isn't for the manager to wait for HR. If your managers aren't effectively leading and managing people, you're in big trouble. And many managers are finding out, I started off in a foxhole in the Army, and when I graduated college, that's where I learned about leadership. And it's not just about taking one course, it's a series of training programs, a series of training situations that managers go through to learn how to be better leaders. So here's how Synovus handles that situation, is they actually, and Synovus is listed several years ago as one of the top 100 best places to work, is a manager's most important role is to serve, grow, and inspire his or her people. We sort of forgot about that the last 4 or 5 years. All those signs about the importance of people sort of disappeared when we started laying people off. Now we have huge problems in companies where, we don't have the right leadership being trained to replace the senior people that may be going off to retirement. And we looked about the comments from that aerospace company is 70% of their workforce is going to retire in the next 5 years. What are you doing to prepare and retain the people that you're going to need to replace those senior leaders when they do move on? One other point is I want to emphasize is about what managers need to do is, and anytime we evaluate or use a 360, for example, on a leader, what you find is the frequency of the communication or the meetings the manager has with their direct reports has a lot to do with the employee's perception if that manager is someone that can be trusted, or if they have confidence in that manager. And if your managers only communicate with their employees once a year during that annual performance review, you can see on this graph here what the trust and confidence level is. is not very good. So managers, and particularly, I'm not, I'm a pretty task-oriented person, and it's important for me to even slow down and just communicate one-on-one with people instead of just thinking about the next project on my to-do list or the next book I need to write. Is the frequency of the communication is very important in building faith and confidence, and has a direct impact on retention and job engagement. And the interesting, when you look at just measuring job engagement, the frequency and the quality of the communications of the senior executives in the company is critical in building engagement with employees in the company. I just want to talk about a couple of communication things. Appreciation calls. This one company would work with the HR people, would find out of an employee who goes above and beyond the call of duty. I don't care if it could be job related or something they did outside the job, a volunteer activity or anything, but HR would let the CEO of this company know who that person was and what they did, and the CEO would call them up on the telephone at home or on weekends, and if the employee didn't drop dead of a surprise, a heart attack, and having the CEO call them up at home, they actually talked to the CEO. And it made them feel, and that was worth 1 million emails. It takes time, and I realize it's hard to reach people on a telephone anymore. And the other thing we found out when we looked at Cisco, we measured what technicians valued as form of a reward recognition, and it wasn't a trophy, it wasn't a plaque. It was that they were able to have a frank, open discussion with their boss's boss, the next senior level manager, just to ask them questions about whatever it is related to their job or the company. That meant more to the technicians than it did to anybody else. So you have to know what motivates people, and that involves communicating with them in an effective way. Yeah, Sarah?
So we do have a couple of questions. I want to. I just thought I'd let you know because I don't know people's schedule. And, are you interested in one, or do you want to keep going and get to the end first?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Cool. So this was interesting with Tammy Clausen. She was asking with employees that have, senior employees, 18 years with the company, and they start to get complacent. How do you motivate, and reinvigorate them to improve their overall performance and gain new skills?
Yeah, that's a great question. Is how do you keep people engaged after they've been with the company for a long time? And that almost goes right into mistake number 6, which is lack of growth opportunities. And there's several things. Anytime you ask a consultant a simple question, you're going to get a long answer. But for the sake of time, what I want to do is you want to make those senior people mentors to the younger people. We talk about generational diversity, and there was one company most companies have the traditional, the senior level person mentors the younger level person. In this one company, they turned it around. They put the younger people in charge of mentoring the older people about what it means to be a 20-something. So they built a stronger communication. The other thing is you want the senior people, make them teach the classes. You don't want just the trainers to do it. Particularly if you're training leadership, have people who are not your normal trainers speak to the people about what it means to be an effective leader. Google, everybody's heard this, and this is another thing, is they give some of I think their engineers 20% of their company time working on pet projects. And that's how they came up with Gmail and some of the other programs Google's come out, is just these were toy projects that their own employees were working on their sort of their 20% developmental or free time. The other thing is send these senior people out on benchmarking teams, to keep people fresh. And you would only do this if you have a good company, because this could also increase your turnover, is send your people out to benchmark other companies about particular things these companies do, and then come back and, sort of like I wouldn't say this is a sabbatical, but we used to do this with the Ritz-Carlton hotels when I worked for the Army Medical Department. We sent our senior level colonels to the Ritz-Carlton Quality Day to find out the secrets of what Ritz-Carlton did when they won the Malcolm Baldrige Award. So hopefully that gave her a few ideas. Now let me just cover the last thing, and then maybe we'll have a question or two, or time for a question or two. The last mistake is pay and benefits not competitive. Here's one that just stands out in my mind as one of the biggest issue with a lot of people in the workforce today. They've learned, because companies had so many cutbacks and layoffs and frozen pay and salary, is everybody's, I wouldn't say everybody, I would say the majority of people, particularly the younger folks, are looking, they've learned they cannot get paid anymore in their current company, in their current position. And so they've learned that the only way you get a pay raise is find another job somewhere else. So everybody needs to look at their pay and benefits. And particularly, if you have not identified your top performers, your high performers who are critical to your company, and you don't have a separate retention plan for those top performing people, you're putting yourself at big risk to lose them. And just think how expensive it is to lose a high performer, because a high performer outperforms an average performer like 3 to 1. So start looking at that and start having those conversations with your CFO and your senior people and say, look, this is going to cost us big time if we don't adjust this. And I know things are starting to improve pay-wise, but everybody I talk to are saying, hey, I've learned the only way I'm going to get a pay raise is go somewhere else. And I don't think that's the way it should be. And the one survey, and we're getting close, we'll have about a minute left for a question or two if there's anything else outstanding there, Sarah. But here was a survey again, what reasons would cause you to leave your employer. 64% salary, 57% is advancement. And the other thing you want to do with your younger people is, even though you don't want them to become stagnant, because with the 20-somethings are thinking, well, I can only stay in this job 12 months or the most 2 years and I become non-competitive, is even, it has nothing to do with their pay, but give them learning opportunities inside your company. Don't let them just stick doing the same thing all the time, unless that's absolutely what they want to do, because you find there are people who are happy being, Joel Barker talked about there are two kinds of people. There are settlers and explorers. Explorers like to move around, start new things. Settlers like to stabilize processes. You need to know what does this person expect, how you can create an internal development program for them, and make sure you design those action plans, or you're going to lose those people and you're going to be with the people maybe you should have never hired in the first place. So I don't know, Sarah, is there anybody else have any questions before we finish up here? We're about almost out of time.
That's great. So this was interesting. Robin Best was asking, what advice do you have for middle managers who are trying to incorporate, these important strategies, such as, increasing employee engagement, open and consistent communication and retention, when the upper management isn't necessarily on board? What can middle management do?
Yeah, it sounds like reality. Upper management sometimes is living in a different world. I, I learned I am what you call a high D personality. Anyone who's been through my DISC training knows what that means. Is I, I'm the kind of person who always uh, asks for forgiveness after you've already started something. And there's a great book written years ago called Zapped by William Bynum. And it talked about the same situation. Upper management, they were living in their world and reality was beneath them. And this one leader in this department said, I am going to make a difference. And this person changed the culture of that one department. And then all of a sudden, it started blooming throughout the company. And that's what I call leadership. Joel Barker also said a leader is someone that will take you to a place you will not go to by yourself. So you want to sort of encourage people to be catalysts of change. I mean, you want to protect them, but and that's how change usually begins in a company, is that there's one person or one department says, by golly, I'm going to do this and make life better for my employees and create a good culture. And then all of a sudden, it starts growing in the company. It's sort of like, you got to prove it to me. So that's what I would, if you're an HR person and you got a department and you want to do a pilot, I would, give them permission in advance and be a leader and take charge and start making an improvement. And then all of a sudden you'll find all those senior people say, hey, that Sarah Stewart or that Greg Smith, they're really an outstanding leader. Look, they made an improvement. Let's do it throughout the whole company. And I know there's a little risk involved in that, but life's too short to be working in a place that is terrible. That's just the way my philosophy. Any other questions before we finish up?
Yeah, we've got one more that's been patiently waiting. Leslie Arroyo, I think that's how you say your name. Would you recommend a company investing in a program that gives a questionnaire to a prospective new hire similar to a personality profile?
Give them you mean a questionnaire? I mean, here's, if I was king, anyone who applies for my company, they would take a behavior assessment, and then that behavior assessment will be, if they're hired, it will be given to that employee, and that manager would be trained to sit down with that behavior, that DISC assessment. That's what I train my people to do. Sit down with the employee one-on-one, go over that assessment. And it says, Leslie, you like to be communicated directly this way. Is that true? And that's part of the first performance coaching. If you don't use behavior assessments or online tools, have a questionnaire like that motivational profile. I think I put those questions in one of my books. I think Here Today, Here Tomorrow, Transforming Your Workplace from High Turnover to High Retention, and just write them down on a piece of paper and go over those questions as sort of a mandatory orientation process with those new employees. And make sure you got an effective orientation process for new employees. Don't just give them a big employee handbook and say, read this and sign it. That's it. Congratulations, company. So anyway, we're close. We're right at 3:44. So I want to finish up. Is there anything else we need to say, Sarah, before we finish today's webinar?
No, I think that's it. We had a great turnout, a lot of great questions. I hope we got to most of them.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for attending today. I am recording this. We will have a recording. You'll get an email with the link to the handouts probably today or tomorrow. It's automated. And so if we can ever be of help to you, your managers, or your company, just remember to chart your course. So I wish all of you have a great day, and we'll talk to you. We're going to try to do these webinars maybe every other month or every month on some particular topic. So if you have a topic, send it to either Sarah@chartcourse.com or Greg@chartcourse.com, and we'll add it to our agenda. Anyway, have a great day and talk to you soon.